Night came fast and heavy, the kind of night that soaks a man clear through and leaves the land smelling like iron and smoke. Sheriff Jacob Rains rode with his hat low and his coat clinging. The sky opened and the desert took it. Wind shoved at the mesquite. Lightning sketched bones across the clouds. His horse, Bramble, shook rain from its mane and kept to the narrow wash that led toward the old trestle bridge. A fire burned there, small, careful, wrong for a storm like this. Jacob slowed. He listened. Water hissed in the sage. The creek swelled and spoke in a low rush. There was a rhythm to nights like these. The world breathed. A man could hear his own past if he was not careful. Jacob breathed once, twice. He slid from the saddle and tied Bramble to a cottonwood. Someone moved near the fire. He stepped closer. The light kissed a pair of boots first, then a hem of a dark skirt. A woman sat with her back to him, shoulders tight in a worn coat. Wet hair fell down like river weed. She was still as a deer in winter, except for the slight tremor of her hands near the flame. She had chosen a hollow where the wind broke. Smart. Jacob stopped 3 paces behind. The rain thinned. He watched steam lift from the rocks. He set his hand near his holster, but let it rest there, easy. You will not startle, he told himself. Evening, he said, voice low. She did not jump. She turned slow and showed him eyes that held the storm and calmed it all at once. Grey at first, then green when the fire leaned her way. A cut marked her cheek. Soft blood had washed away in the rain. Sheriff, she said. His name sat in that title. He felt it settle inside him, careful and exact. She had known who he was before she turned. That was rare. That was something. You hurt? He asked. No. She glanced at the fire. Cold is all. He nodded at the flames. Fire will fight you in rain. It takes patience. I have some, she said. Lightning throbbed behind the bridge. Thunder rolled down the wash. Jacob saw the wet line of her throat as she swallowed. He saw the way she held her shoulders, not proud, not weak, just ready. A woman who had made a choice and was living in the center of it. He pointed toward the cottonwood. My horse can carry 2 if the creek rises. This place will flood before dawn. I will not be here at dawn, she said. Jacob looked at the bridge. You waiting on someone? I was, she said. Maybe I still am. He stepped beside the fire and held his palms to the heat. The rain hissed and lifted. He could smell her now. Wet leather. Faded rose water, smoke that had lived in her coat for years. She watched his hands. She watched the steady way he moved. She did not flinch from his quiet. Name? He asked. Too many men have claimed it, she said. Tonight it is mine alone. A small smile tugged at him, somewhere deep where smiles still lived. He had not expected that. Not out here. Not in this weather. He kept his face still. He let the firelight do the soft work. She shifted, and the coat parted. A revolver sat on her thigh, wrapped in oiled cloth, clean, ready. Her fingers touched it like a memory, not a weapon. Jacob felt the air tilt. He let his hand drop from the holster. He took off his hat and shook the rain back into the night. You plan to use that, he said, or is it a comfort in the storm? Both, she answered. Silence moved between them, not empty, full. The creek rose, rain ticked against stone. Somewhere far off, a coyote called, thin and lost in the wet. Jacob thought of his father's voice. A good man does not push a closed door. He waits until it is offered. He keeps his patience warm. He crouched by the flames and fed a small stick to the heart of it. Sparks went up like dry wishes, bright for a breath, gone the next. She watched his fingers as if they held a story. "Where are you headed?" he asked. She leaned closer to the heat. The light softened her face. "Away," she said, "from a mess that will not clean, from a place where every morning looks the same kind of wrong." "Town?" he asked. "Men," she said. He looked into the fire. He understood that sound. He had seen it in the jail cells, in the way certain girls moved down Main Street with eyes that never rested. He had seen it in his own mirror after too many nights with a bottle and the sound of rain on the roof. "But then," she whispered, the night seemed to say. Her voice dropped. "There is a man who thinks he owns my breath." Jacob did not lift his gaze. He kept it on the fire so the truth could travel easy. "He does not," Jacob said. Her shoulders loosened. He saw it happen. A small change. A hinge giving. She closed her eyes and let the storm speak for her a moment. When she opened them, she looked different. The world had pushed, and she had held. "You always talk like that?" she asked. "Like a church with boots on." "Only in rain," he said. A faint laugh came and went, soft as smoke. She reached under her coat and drew out a small canteen. She drank and then offered it. He took it. The water was warm. It tasted like tin and lightning. He handed it back, careful that his fingers brushed hers. The touch was light, warm, thoughtful, not claim, not test. A bridge. Heat moved through her. He felt it move through him, not sharp, not sudden. A tide coming in and smoothing the sand. "You have a place to stay?" he asked. "Only if I can pass this bridge," she said. "Flash flood will take it," he said. "Give it an hour." "Then we wait," she said. They sat quiet. The fire took their wet and returned it as steam. The storm gentled. The land gave back the smell of creosote and a faint sweetness in the sage. Jacob listened to her breath find an even pace. He listened to his own heart fall in line with it. Simple. Human. Good. He looked up at the bridge again. He looked at her face, the cut on her cheek, the way her mouth rested when she was not ready to fight. A question pressed at him. "What should I call you?" he asked. "Something better than girl in the rain." Her eyes held him. A slow resolve moved there. She seemed to weigh the night, weigh him, weigh the secret she had carried across miles of hard land. "Tessa," she said. "Tessa Wilder." The name hung in the wet air. Wilder. The creek spoke louder against stone. Memory rose like heat from old coals. Jacob knew the weight of that name in this county. He had tracked it across months and broken fences. He had written it on wanted sheets in a hand that did not shake. He had failed to catch it more than once. Wilder meant storms with bullets in them. Wilder meant the kind of trouble that rooted deep. His voice did not change. He kept it level. "Any kin I should know?" he asked. Her gaze did not waver. I am my own, she said, but blood is a hard river, Sheriff. Something inside him turned, not fear, not duty, something older. A hinge in his chest gave. He felt the pull that had nothing to do with the badge and everything to do with being a man under a sky that could drown him and bless him in the same hour. The creek surged. A limb swept past in the dark. The bridge groaned and held. The fire hissed and leaned toward them. Tessa drew the coat closer and looked at him as if he were the map and the storm and the rest between them. Her voice softened. If I cross before dawn, she said, I will not cross alone. Jacob looked at the water, then at her. The night drew in its breath. The first soft promise of trust touched the air and stayed. The bridge shuddered. The current rose 1 inch more. If this story has warmed a quiet corner of your heart, stay close. The storm is not finished. The night still has more to tell. Rain eased by the time the moon broke through. The clouds tore open above the canyon, showing a thin slice of light. The storm had spent most of itself, but the creek still frothed wild against the stones. Jacob sat with his back to a boulder, hat tilted low. His coat steamed. The fire between him and Tessa threw long shadows on the ground. She had not spoken for near an hour. Only the quiet sound of her boots shifting, the small breath of her trying to get warm. Jacob liked the silence. It said more than talk ever could. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, the kind that carried only far enough for him to hear. You knew the name, she said. Wilder. Jacob didn't lift his eyes from the fire. Hard name to forget. My father made sure of that. He nodded. Silas Wilder, outlaw, robbed a payroll wagon 2 years back. 3 men dead. 4, she said. You forgot my brother. Her tone was flat, but there was something cracked underneath, like glass under a boot. Jacob looked up. The moonlight caught her face, pale against the darkness. The scar on her cheek shone faintly. I buried him myself, she said. My father rode off and never came back. The law said they'd hang him if they found him. I've been running from that shadow ever since. Jacob studied her eyes. They were steady, but there was a tiredness there. Years of it. You think your father's still out there? He asked. I know he is, she said. He sent word last month. A boy brought it. Said I should meet him across this bridge before the floods. Jacob exhaled. And you came. She gave a faint, broken smile. It's hard to outrun the blood that made you. For a while, they said nothing. The fire cracked. The rain dripped from the cottonwood leaves in slow rhythm. Somewhere a night bird called once, then was gone. Jacob leaned forward, feeding the fire another stick. If he's close, this bridge isn't safe. Men with a price on their heads don't come alone. I know, she whispered. That's why I built the fire. He'd see it from the ridge. Jacob felt something twist inside him, a pull he didn't trust. She was an outlaw's daughter, a wanted man's blood. But she looked small in the glow, her coat still wet, hair curling at her neck. He couldn't picture her as danger, only as someone who had learned to live where no one was safe. He poured coffee from his tin flask and held it out. Drink. She hesitated, then took it. Her fingers brushed his. The heat of that brief touch ran through him like whiskey. She drank slow, eyes on the flames. "You're a kind man, Sheriff." He gave a quiet laugh. "That word doesn't follow me much." "It should," she said. "You carry silence like it's meant to keep others warm." He looked at her then, really looked. Her lips were trembling from cold, but her gaze was unflinching. He felt something loosen deep in his chest. "You should rest," he said. "We'll move when the water drops." "I haven't slept near a man with a gun in years," she said. "You'll find I sleep light." Her mouth curved slightly. "I wasn't talking about danger." The words hung between them. Not an invitation, not yet, just truth. Jacob turned his face toward the storm's fading horizon. His jaw tightened. There were rules, lines he didn't cross, but the quiet between them felt like a promise he'd already broken. The night deepened. The air smelled of wet cedar and smoke. Jacob felt his body relax for the first time in days. The firelight played on her cheekbones, soft gold against her damp skin. She laid back against her saddlebag, coat pulled close. "Tell me," she said, "why a man like you stays out here alone?" He thought for a moment before answering. "Peace, and the kind of silence that doesn't lie." "Does it help?" "Sometimes," he said, "until nights like this." She smiled faintly, eyes closing. "Then maybe the storm was meant to find you." Jacob watched her breathing slow. Rain softened into mist. The creek murmured low like a song remembering itself. He felt the strange comfort of her nearness, the warmth of the fire reflecting in his eyes. Somewhere behind them, the sound of a loose rock echoed, a small clatter swallowed by water. Jacob's head snapped up. His hand went to his revolver, thumb resting on the hammer. He rose silently, scanning the ridge. Nothing moved, just wind and shadow. Tessa stirred, half asleep. "What is it?" "Nothing yet," he said, voice quiet. "Go on resting." But his body stayed tense. He knew the desert's silence too well. It only came that way when something else was listening. He waited another minute. The sound didn't return. The creek's roar dulled his hearing. Maybe it was just runoff loosening stone. Maybe. Still, Jacob sat back down near her, his revolver across his lap, eyes fixed on the dark. Tessa's breathing steadied again. Her face turned slightly toward him. The firelight brushed the edge of her mouth. Jacob looked away, forcing calm into his chest. Duty first, always duty. But as the minutes passed, the thought came unbidden. She trusted him enough to sleep, and that, more than any bullet or outlaw, was what scared him most. He leaned back against the rock, eyes on the faint glow of dawn starting beyond the ridge. The bridge still stood, slick and trembling under the rush. When he finally spoke, it was to the quiet more than to her. "Rest easy, Tessa Wilder," he murmured. "Morning's not done with us yet." The wind shifted, carrying the far-off sound of hooves, slow, deliberate, coming closer. If this story has stirred something gentle in you, stay close. The dawn carries its own kind of storm. The first light of morning broke pale and cold over the canyon. Mist clung low to the creek, curling around the stones like smoke from an old fire. Jacob Rains stirred before the sun had fully cleared the ridge. Years of habit had trained him to wake at the faintest shift in sound. The hooves he'd heard in the night had faded. But the unease they carried still sat in his chest. He rose quietly. The fire had died to ash. Only a thin line of smoke rose into the grey dawn. Across from him, Tessa lay curled beneath her coat, hair tangled and damp, lips parted slightly. For a moment, he let himself look. She looked nothing like the daughter of a wanted man. She looked like someone the desert itself had tried to claim and failed. Jacob crouched near the water's edge, testing the current. It had dropped some. The bridge, though slick, would hold. He turned as Tessa's voice reached him, soft and low, still caught in sleep. "You watching me, Sheriff?" He smiled faintly. "Making sure the storm didn't steal you." She pushed herself up, rubbing her eyes. The morning light touched her face, and Jacob caught the glimmer of the scar again. He wanted to ask how she'd gotten it, but he didn't. Some scars needed their silence. "Did you sleep?" she asked. "Enough to keep my gun hand steady," he said. She looked toward the bridge. "You heard them too, didn't you?" Jacob nodded once. "Hooves. Just one horse, maybe two. They stopped when the rain did." Her jaw tightened. "He found me." Jacob studied her face. "Your father? I don't know who else would follow me through this kind of weather." The wind cut through the canyon, lifting her hair. She stood, shoulders squared, a flicker of fear hidden behind calm. "If he's close, he'll come from the ridge. He always liked to watch before stepping in." Jacob buckled his gun belt and adjusted his hat. "Then he's watching right now." She met his eyes. "You gonna arrest him, Sheriff?" Jacob didn't answer right away. His badge had rules, but his heart was less obedient. "If he draws first, I won't have a choice." Her mouth pressed tight. "Then I hope he doesn't." The morning stretched thin between them. Every sound felt louder, the drip from the rocks, the restless breath of the horse, the sigh of wind through wet sage. Jacob led Bramble closer to the fire pit, saddled and ready. "If you're smart, you'll cross that bridge before he gets close enough to see your face." "I can't," she said. "He sent word. He wants something from me. If I don't show, he'll burn every trail behind me until he does." "What could he want?" Tessa looked away. "A map." Jacob frowned. "To what?" Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "To the money he buried after the robbery. I was a child, but I remember where the ground broke." Jacob exhaled slow. "And he thinks you'll just hand it to him." "I think he knows I'm tired of running." The wind shifted again, carrying with it a faint metallic rattle, the unmistakable sound of a spur brushing against stone. Jacob's hand went to his revolver. Tessa froze, her eyes darting toward the ridge. Then a voice drifted down, hoarse, steady, threaded with age and smoke. "Tessa, girl, you keep strange company these days." A man stood at the top of the ridge, raincoat torn, hat pulled low. His beard was streaked with grey. Even from that distance, Jacob recognized the sharp outline of his jaw. Silas Wilder. Jacob stepped forward, body between Silas and Tessa. "You're trespassing on county land, Wilder." Silas laughed, dry and bitter. "County land? You think the dirt gives a damn about who writes its laws?" He tilted his head. "Step aside, Sheriff. I've come for my blood, not yours." Jacob didn't move. "She's under my watch." "That badge won't keep her," Silas said. "She's mine." Tessa's voice cut through, strong despite the tremor. "I'm not yours. Not anymore." Her father's face shifted. A flicker of pain crossed it, real and brief, "You got her believing she's free, do you?" he said to Jacob. "You don't know this desert lawman. It don't let go easy." Lightning flashed somewhere far beyond the ridge, though the storm had already passed. Jacob felt the air tighten. He could smell the faint bite of gun oil from Silas's coat. "Don't do this," Jacob said. "You walk away now. I'll let you ride out clean." Silas smiled, but there was no kindness in it. "You think mercy's worth something out here? You'll learn." His hand twitched toward the revolver. Jacob moved first. The gunfire came sharp, rolling off the canyon walls. One shot, two. Then silence. Tessa screamed his name. The echo swallowed it whole. When the dust cleared, Silas Wilder lay half in shadow, one hand clutching his side. Blood soaked the edge of his coat. Jacob stood breathing hard, smoke curling from his revolver. Tessa stumbled forward, dropping to her knees beside her father. "No, no, no!" Silas coughed, crimson staining his teeth. "Always did pick bad company," he rasped, eyes flicking up to Jacob. "Tell me, Sheriff, you gonna finish what the others started?" Jacob holstered his gun. "You don't need my help dying." Silas laughed weakly. "Fair enough." He turned his gaze to Tessa. "The map, girl. Don't let him have it." "I don't care about your damn gold," she said through tears. "You ruined every soul that touched it." He tried to speak again, but the sound died in his throat. His eyes went glassy, fixed on the rising sun. For a long moment, the canyon held its breath. Then it was over. Tessa knelt beside her father's body, shaking, rain and tears indistinguishable on her face. Jacob stepped closer, removing his hat. He wanted to speak, but there were no words wide enough for loss like that. After a while she whispered, "You should have let him go." Jacob's voice was quiet. He drew first. She didn't look at him. "That doesn't mean it hurts less." The wind picked up again, carrying the smell of wet dust and gunpowder. Jacob looked toward the bridge, the creek flashing gold under the new light. "We can't stay here," he said softly. "Vultures'll come by noon." Tessa wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Where would we go?" He met her eyes. "Where the law don't reach so fast." For the first time, she didn't argue. Jacob reached for her hand, not to lead, but to steady. She let him. The contact lingered longer than it should have. Together they crossed the trembling bridge, the storm's scent fading behind them. The world on the other side waited quiet, open, uncertain. If this story has touched a restless place in your heart, ride a little further. The dust hasn't settled yet, and neither has the truth between them. The day burned itself into gold and silence. Heat shimmered off the rocks, and the wind carried a dry whisper through the mesquite. Jacob Rains rode ahead, his coat dark against the pale sand. Behind him, Tessa Wilder followed on her father's horse, face hidden beneath the brim of her hat. The sun had already stripped the night's rain from the earth. Neither spoke for a long time. Only the rhythm of hooves filled the space between them. Jacob's mind replayed the gunfire, the way Silas had fallen. He'd killed men before, but this one sat heavier than the rest. Maybe it was the way Tessa had looked at her father's body, or maybe it was the way she hadn't looked at Jacob since... He slowed his horse near a dry creek bed. "We'll make camp here." Too open to ride blind through the heat. Tessa dismounted without a word. She tied her horse and began gathering brush for a small fire. Her movements were sharp, efficient, like a woman who needed the work to keep her grief from spilling out. Jacob watched her a moment before speaking. "You should eat something. I'm not hungry." You need strength." She shot him a look that could cut through stone. "You think I can't take care of myself?" "I think grief don't care how strong you are," he said. Her hands stilled. The bundle of twigs trembled slightly. "You talk like you know." "I do," he said quietly. "Lost a brother to the same dust you're standing on." Her anger softened, just enough for her shoulders to lower. "How?" "Outlaws took a shipment bound for Silver Bend. He rode with the posse, never came back. I was young, thought justice could fix anything." She sank to her knees beside the fire pit. "Did it?" Jacob crouched across from her, striking a match. "No," he said. "Justice is a fine thing, but it don't bring warmth." The flame caught. They sat across from each other, the fire flickering low between them. Heat shimmered on her face, drawing faint lines of exhaustion beneath her eyes. "I used to think my father was the strongest man alive," she said. "Then I watched him bleed out like any other. Turns out strength doesn't save anyone." Jacob nodded slowly. "No, but mercy can." She looked at him then, the first real look since the gunfight. "You think you were merciful?" "I think I didn't hate him," he said. "Sometimes that's all a man can offer." Tessa's lips parted as if to argue, but the words didn't come. Instead, she leaned back, eyes on the open sky. "All my life he told me not to trust the law, said it only protects the men who write it." "Sometimes he was right," Jacob said. She smiled faintly. "You admitting that with a badge on?" "Badge don't mean blind," he said. The quiet between them changed then, softer. Not peace, not yet, but the edge dulled. The wind brushed Tessa's hair across her cheek. Jacob reached out before he could stop himself and tucked it behind her ear. The movement was gentle, deliberate. Her breath caught. He pulled his hand back, slow. "You should rest." Her eyes lingered on him. "You always this careful?" "Only when I should be." She studied him, the hard lines of his jaw, the calm weight of his voice. "Maybe you should try not being careful once." Jacob's chest tightened. The sun dipped behind the ridge, painting the canyon in rose and amber. "That kind of thing gets a man killed." "Maybe," she said. "But at least he feels something before he goes." He looked at her, really looked. The wild in her name lived behind those eyes. The same wild he'd spent his life taming inside himself. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. Tessa broke the gaze first, turning toward the dying light. "You'll report this, won't you? My father's death." "I'll write what's true," Jacob said. "And what's that?" "That he drew first, that you had nothing to do with it, that the desert buried a man who'd already been lost a long time ago." Her throat worked as she swallowed. "You'd lie for me?" He shook his head. "No, but I'd protect what's left of you." The words hung between them, heavier than any promise. She looked down, blinking hard. For the first time, her tears didn't hide behind anger. Jacob rose, giving her space. The sun had almost vanished now, leaving streaks of crimson bleeding into violet. He walked toward the horses, pretending not to hear her quiet sob. He didn't speak again until the stars came out. "We ride at dawn," he said, voice low, "east, toward the old mining trail. There's water and shelter that way." She nodded, still facing the fire. "And after?" "After," he said, We'll see what's left to want. The night came cool. Coyotes called from the ridge, distant and lonely. Tessa lay near the fire, eyes open, watching the stars burn. Jacob sat a few feet away, his revolver resting beside his knee. Every so often she turned her head just enough to see him, his silhouette against the flames, the faint shine of his badge, the quiet steadiness in his posture. There was comfort there, even when she didn't want it. She closed her eyes finally, and her voice drifted across the fire. "Thank you, Jacob." He looked at her, but she'd already gone quiet. The sheriff leaned back against the rock, eyes on the stars. His breath left slow, steady. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. But beyond the ridge, unseen, two riders moved under the moon, following their trail. If this story has found a tender place in you, stay close. The night ahead carries more than stars. It carries the reckoning of hearts that refuse to rest. Dawn rose quiet and red over the ridge. The fire had burned down to embers. Jacob stirred before the first birds called, already tightening the cinch on Bramble's saddle. The air was cool and sharp, the kind that carried the smell of iron and dust. Behind him, Tessa woke slow, eyes heavy, hair tangled from sleep. For a while she said nothing. She just watched him move. The way he packed, deliberate and silent, as though every motion was a kind of prayer. "You don't sleep much, do you?" she asked. Jacob glanced over his shoulder. "Sleep's a luxury a man loses once he starts counting ghosts." She sat up, pulling her coat tighter. "You've got ghosts too?" He met her eyes for a brief moment. "Don't we all?" The sky brightened. A pale gold light spread across the desert. When the horses were ready, they rode east toward the mining trail. The silence between them was different now, less heavy, more alive. Jacob noticed how she held herself straighter, how the tightness in her voice from the night before had softened. The trail wound through a canyon lined with sandstone cliffs, their edges still wet from the storm. The sun's first rays caught in the water, pooled between stones, reflecting like pieces of glass. "Used to come through here when I was a kid," Tessa said suddenly. "My father said the desert keeps its secrets better than people ever could." Jacob looked ahead. He wasn't wrong about that. She smiled faintly. But secrets have a way of finding their way out, especially when men with badges start asking questions. He raised an eyebrow. "You think I'm here for your father's gold?" "I think most men would be." "I'm not most men." Her gaze lingered on him. "No, you're not." They rode in silence a while longer. The sun rose higher, painting the world in the kind of light that made even sorrow look holy. By mid-morning they reached a narrow valley, half hidden behind a line of cottonwoods. A small spring bubbled near the rocks, cold and clear. Jacob dismounted first, knelt and cupped water into his hands. It felt good against the heat already rising. Tessa followed, kneeling beside him. Her fingers brushed his as she reached into the same stream. Neither moved away this time. "Guess the land decided to be kind today," she said. "Or maybe it's just giving us a reprieve before it starts testing us again." She looked up, studying his face. "Do you ever stop bracing for the worst?" Jacob smiled slightly, eyes still on the water. "Only when the company's worth trusting." Her breath caught, but she masked it with a quiet laugh. "You always talk like a preacher with a gun." "I quit preaching long ago," he said. "Didn't like the sound of my own sermons." For a while they sat there, the kind of silence that felt less like emptiness and more like rest. The desert hummed softly around them, wind through the grass, water whispering against stone. Then Tessa spoke again, voice barely above a breath. "You think we can outrun the past, Jacob?" He took his time before answering. "No, but sometimes we can ride far enough that it stops shouting." She looked down, fingers tracing small circles in the sand. "I thought if I kept moving, I'd be free. But maybe freedom isn't about leaving things behind. Maybe it's about who rides beside you when you can't run anymore," he said. Tessa's eyes lifted to his. The words hung there, suspended between the wind and their hearts. Jacob looked away first, reaching for his canteen. He filled it, then handed it to her. "Drink. We've got miles yet." She took it, but her hand trembled just slightly when their fingers touched again. This time, Jacob didn't pull away. She drank, eyes never leaving his. "You keep saving me," she said softly. "But you don't even know what I've done." "I don't need to," he said. "I see who you are now." Her throat tightened. "And who's that?" He held her gaze. "A woman trying to make peace with ghosts she didn't summon." Her lip trembled just once, then steadied. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he said, "but it's possible." For the first time since the bridge, she smiled. A real one, soft and small. The kind that makes a man forget the weight he carries. The moment broke when brambles snorted and shifted. Jacob turned sharply, scanning the ridge. Dust rose faintly in the distance. Two riders, still far off but closing fast. Tessa saw them too. "They followed us." Jacob stood, all calm gone from his face. "Looks like your father's gold is calling in old debts." Her voice shook. "What do we do?" He checked his revolver. "We keep moving. There's an abandoned way station 2 miles east. Stone walls, narrow pass. We can hold ground there if we have to." She mounted her horse, eyes sharp with fear and something fiercer beneath it. "You think they'll shoot to kill?" "They'll shoot to claim," he said. "But I've got something they don't." "What's that?" He looked at her as he swung into the saddle. "A reason to survive." They rode hard, wind cutting their faces, the desert roaring back to life beneath them. Behind, dust spiraled higher, 2 dark shapes gaining ground. The past had found them again, and this time it rode fast. If this story has steadied your breath beneath the same wide sky, stay close. The chase is only beginning, and not every storm comes from the sky. The sun climbed higher, burning the last of the morning cool. The world shimmered with heat, the air rippling above the sand like something alive. Jacob Rains led the way, his horse running hard, breath coming in steady bursts. Behind him, Tessa rode close, her hair whipping loose, her eyes fixed on the narrow pass ahead. Dust billowed behind them. 2 riders, dark and fast. The sound of their hooves carried like thunder through the canyon. "Faster!" Jacob shouted. Tessa leaned low over her saddle, spurring her horse forward. They reached the mouth of the pass, where the land tightened between 2 walls of jagged rock. Beyond it stood the ruins of an old way station, a forgotten stop from the stagecoach days, its roof half collapsed, walls cracked but standing. Jacob dismounted first, pulling his rifle from the saddle. "Inside," he said. Tessa slid down, breathless. The heat shimmered around them like firelight. "You think they saw us come through?" Doesn't matter, Jacob said, scanning the ridge. They'll find the trail. He guided her inside. The air was cooler in the shadows. Dust motes hung thick, and the smell of old hay lingered faintly. A single window opened toward the canyon mouth. Jacob knelt beside it, loading his rifle. Tessa watched him. Her hands trembled as she brushed hair from her face. "You've done this before," she said quietly. He didn't look at her. "Too many times." She crossed her arms. "You always this calm before a fight?" Jacob glanced at her, just a flicker of a smile. "A man's only got two choices, be calm or be dead." Her gaze lingered on him. "And which one are you now?" He chambered around and met her eyes. "Both." The sound of hooves echoed faintly through the canyon. Closer now. Slow, calculated. Jacob motioned for silence. They crouched low by the window, eyes on the narrow entrance. Two figures appeared, one lean and tall, the other broader, both dressed in dust and leather, their faces half covered by scarves. Bounty hunters. Jacob recognized the posture, the quiet arrogance of men who'd killed before and didn't lose sleep over it. The taller one called out, voice rough. "Sheriff Rains! Heard you been riding with Silas Wilder's girl." Jacob didn't answer. The man laughed, cruel and echoing. "Don't bother hiding. We just want the map. Hand her over, and maybe we let you keep breathing." Tessa flinched. Her hand went to the small satchel at her waist. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, lay a scrap of paper, part map, part memory, marked with the creek bends her father had once shown her. Jacob whispered, "How many more know about it?" "I don't know," she said, "but they won't stop." Jacob's voice dropped to a growl. "Then they'll wish they had." The taller bounty hunter fired a warning shot. The bullet splintered wood near the window, showering them with dust. Jacob waited, calm. Then, as the man stepped into the open, Jacob fired once. The rifle's crack tore through the canyon. The man dropped instantly, the echo of his fall swallowed by the wind. The second rider cursed and ducked behind a rock. Tessa gasped, pressing against the wall. Jacob pulled her down beside him as another bullet struck the frame above their heads. "Stay low," he said. "I can shoot," she whispered. He looked at her hands, steady now, not shaking. "You sure?" She met his eyes. "You forget who raised me." Jacob nodded once. He handed her his revolver. "Short range. Make it count." The silence stretched long and tight. The second bounty hunter moved from cover, trying to flank them along the wall. Jacob stepped out, rifle braced, and fired again. The shot grazed the man's arm, spinning him sideways. Tessa took aim through the broken door and squeezed the trigger. The bullet hit true. The man staggered back, falling into the sand, the sound of his breath fading fast. For a moment, all Jacob could hear was his heartbeat. Tessa lowered the gun, hands shaking now that the danger had passed. Jacob reached her side, catching her wrist gently. "You all right?" She nodded, but tears welled in her eyes. "I've never killed anyone before." He looked at her for a long time, his voice quiet, heavy with truth. "Then don't start counting. It doesn't get easier." She breathed out, shaky and soft. "Doesn't feel like victory." "It never does," he said. They buried the bodies behind the station. The work was quiet, grim. When it was done, Jacob washed his hands in the creek that cut behind the rocks. Tessa knelt beside him, her reflection rippling in the water. "He'll never stop," she said. There'll always be someone after that gold. Jacob looked at her reflection, not her face. Then we find it first. Her head snapped toward him. Why? Because leaving it buried won't end this. It'll just keep feeding men like them. We find it, we end the trail. And then what? She asked. He turned to her, his face lit by the lowering sun. Then we bury it right. The words held something else, something deeper than law or duty. She saw it in the way his voice softened when he said, we. Tessa studied him, torn between trust and fear. You'd risk everything for that? He met her eyes. For peace, yes. For you, maybe more. Her breath caught. The wind stilled between them, just for a heartbeat. Then, far off, thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from the canyon's deep belly. The storm was gone, yet the earth rumbled like it remembered. Tessa looked toward the sound, her hand unconsciously finding his. That's not weather. No, Jacob said quietly. That's riders. More of them. He rose, pulling her to her feet. We move at dusk. East again. She squeezed his hand once before letting go. You think we'll make it? He gave her the faintest smile. We've already made it further than we should. The sun fell behind the ridge, and the desert turned to blood and gold. They saddled the horses in silence, leaving behind the way station and the graves that marked it. As they rode into the coming night, the world around them breathed deep and restless, like it knew their story wasn't done. If this tale has stirred the dust in your heart, stay close. The desert remembers love as fiercely as it remembers sin. The desert turned violet under a bleeding sky. Heat fled the air, leaving a chill that whispered through the sage. Jacob Rains rode beside Tessa Wilder, the horses moving slow now, their flanks dark with sweat. Behind them, the horizon burned with sunset, an ember fading to ash. Neither spoke for a long while. The silence wasn't heavy this time. It was full of things unsaid, hanging like dust in the cooling air. Jacob glanced toward her. You holding up? Tessa nodded, though her shoulders slumped. You ever get tired of surviving? He smiled faintly. Every day. She met his gaze, and for the first time since the gunfight, she smiled back. At least you're honest. They rode until the stars came, bright and sharp, over the open plain. When the moon rose, they found shelter beneath an outcropping of rock near a shallow stream. Jacob dismounted first, checking the perimeter by habit. The night carried only the soft rush of water and the distant cry of a coyote. It's safe enough, he said. We'll rest here. Tessa slid down from her saddle, wincing as her feet hit the ground. I forgot what it's like to stop running. Feels strange, doesn't it? Feels dangerous, she said. Like if I let myself breathe, the world might notice and take it back. Jacob chuckled low. Then we'll just breathe quiet. They built a small fire with driftwood from the stream. The light painted their faces gold and amber. Jacob took off his coat and spread it beside her. You'll need it more than I do, he said. Tessa hesitated. You sure? He met her eyes. You think I scare easy from a little cold? She smirked. No, you don't scare at all. Jacob didn't answer. He crouched beside the fire, adding another piece of wood. His movements were slow, deliberate, like a man trying to make the moment last. Tessa watched him, her voice softer now. You could have left me at the station. I could have, he said. Why didn't you?" Jacob looked up, firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Because I wanted to see what happens when you stop running." Her breath caught. "And what do you see?" He didn't smile this time. "A woman worth standing still for." The words hit her like a touch. She turned her face toward the fire, but it did nothing to hide the warmth that climbed her cheeks. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I might believe you." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Maybe that's the point." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It pulsed with something alive, fragile and fierce. The fire popped, sending a spark between them. Tessa broke first, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to do with kindness anymore." Jacob's tone softened. "You don't have to do anything. Just let it happen." Her eyes met his, and something in her steadied. She reached out, fingers brushing his hand. He didn't move, didn't pull away. His skin was warm, calloused, real. "You ever wish the world could start over?" she asked. "Every night," he said, "but tonight's close enough." She laughed quietly, the sound small but full of life. Her fingers lingered in his, tracing the lines of his palm. "You're nothing like the man I thought you'd be. What did you expect?" "Colder," she said. "Harder. The kind who hides behind his badge." Jacob's eyes softened. "Used to be that man. The desert's got a way of sanding down a man's edges, turns him honest, whether he likes it or not." She studied him for a long moment, her gaze unguarded now. "Maybe that's why I found you out here. Maybe I needed someone honest." He swallowed hard, the weight of her words landing deep. "Careful, Tessa Wilder. You're talking like a woman who's about to change everything." "Maybe I already have." The air between them thickened. Jacob's pulse beat slow and steady, loud in his ears. He shifted closer, just enough that their knees brushed. The heat of the fire met the warmth of her body, and for the first time in years he felt something he'd forgotten the shape of, peace that burned. Her breath hitched, barely a whisper. "Jacob." He stopped her with a look, not command, just stillness. "Don't say my name like that unless you mean it." "I do," she said. The words hung there, soft and dangerous. He reached up, tracing the edge of her jaw with rough fingertips. Her skin trembled under his touch. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. When their lips met, it wasn't hunger. It was surrender. The kind that comes when two broken things finally stop fighting the quiet. For a moment, the world fell away. The canyon, the stars, the ghosts. There was only breath and heartbeat and firelight between them. When they finally parted, her forehead rested against his chest. He held her there, saying nothing. After a long silence, she whispered, "What happens now?" Jacob looked out at the horizon, where darkness met dawn. "Now we see if love can outrun what's still chasing us." A faint sound broke the quiet, a low rumble far off in the desert. Horses, too many to count. Jacob's jaw tightened. "They found us." Tessa's hand gripped his arm. "How?" "Doesn't matter." He stood, pulling her up with him. "We ride before the sun finds us." She met his gaze, fear and trust tangled together. "Then let's ride, Sheriff." They packed fast, the fire still glowing behind them as they disappeared into the blue shadows of dawn. If this story has found the echo of your heartbeat beneath the same stars, stay close. The chase isn't over, and neither is what's growing between them. The first light of dawn came cold and silver over the canyon, stretching long shadows across the sand. The world looked washed clean, but Jacob Rains knew better. The desert only ever looked peaceful before the kill. They rode hard, wind biting their faces, hooves thundering through the dry wash. Behind them, the echo of pursuit grew louder, a storm of men, steel, and vengeance. Tessa clung low to her saddle, her hair snapping in the wind. "How many do you think?" "Too many," Jacob said, "and they ain't bounty hunters this time." Her voice tightened. "Then who?" "Men who think your father's gold still belongs to them." Her hand clenched the reins. "And they'll tear the land apart to find it." Jacob looked ahead. The land opened into a wide basin cut by dry arroyos. Far to the east, a line of black hills shimmered in the heat. "We'll make for the ridge," he said. "There's an old miner's cave up there. We hold out till nightfall." They pushed the horses harder. The desert blurred around them, wind, dust, memory. Jacob's jaw set in silence. He'd ridden toward death before, but never with someone he wanted to protect more than himself. When they reached the ridge, the horses were near spent. Jacob helped Tessa down, his hands lingering just long enough to feel the tremor in her grip. "You're shaking," he said. "So are you," she whispered. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Only means we're still alive." They climbed toward the cave, scrambling over loose rock. Inside, the air was cool and still, heavy with the smell of earth and time. Jacob led the horses into the shadowed corner and tied them off. Outside, the wind carried faint shouts. The men were close. Tessa's breath quickened. "They'll find us." Jacob checked his rifle, loading the last of his cartridges. "Not before I make them regret it." She stepped closer, catching his arm. "Jacob, stop. You can't fight them all." He turned to her, calm, unflinching. "I don't plan to." Her voice cracked. "Then what are you planning?" He looked past her, toward the light spilling at the cave's mouth. "I'm planning to make sure you get out alive." She shook her head. "No, you don't get to decide that for me." He met her eyes, voice low and steady. "Someone has to." For a moment, neither spoke. The desert outside went still, too still. Then a voice called out, rough and confident, echoing off the canyon walls. "Sheriff Rains, we know you're up there. Hand over the girl, and maybe we let you die clean." Jacob exhaled. "They talk too much." Tessa moved closer to the entrance, but Jacob pulled her back. "Stay behind the rocks, no matter what." She gritted her teeth. "You give a lot of orders for a man outnumbered." He smirked. "That's how I've stayed alive this long." Then came the first shot, a sharp crack that split the morning air. The bullet sparked off the cave wall. Jacob ducked low, returning fire with a clean, measured rhythm. 2 shots, 2 men down, the others fanned wide, trying to flank. 5 left, he muttered. Tessa crouched beside him, eyes fierce. "You can't take 5. Watch me." She grabbed his wrist. "Jacob, listen to me. My father's map. It isn't gold. It's a grave." He froze. "What?" "It marks where he buried the men he killed for it. He made me memorize the place so I'd know what greed costs." Jacob's pulse thundered in his ears. "Then they're chasing ghosts." "Same as us," she said quietly. A bullet tore through the rock near her head. Jacob shoved her down, shielding her with his body. Stone dust filled the air. "Stay down!" She pressed her hands against his chest. "If we die here, it can't be for nothing." Jacob looked into her eyes, wide, wild, alive. "Then what's it for?" Her hand trembled against his cheek. "For the chance that someone finally stops running." He swallowed hard. The echo of gunfire outside faded to the low hum of wind. He leaned in, voice rough with truth. "You make me want to stop." She smiled, tears burning her eyes. "Then stop." He kissed her, fierce, desperate, real. The world beyond the cave vanished. There was only heat and breath and the weight of a promise too late to take back. Then the silence broke. A shadow moved across the entrance. Jacob spun, fired once. The shot hit true. The man fell hard, his rifle clattering to stone. Another voice shouted, closer now. "He's hit! Move in!" Jacob ducked back, jaw tight. "They're climbing the ridge," Tessa's voice trembled. "Then we ride, now." He grabbed his saddlebag, slinging it over his shoulder. "We'll have to draw them out." "You mean sacrifice yourself?" He met her gaze, firelight flickering in his eyes. "No, I mean trust me." She hesitated, then nodded. "Always." He handed her the reins. "Ride north till you see the split in the canyon. Follow the dry wash. Don't look back." She caught his hand, holding it tight. "You come find me, Jacob Rains." "I will," he said, "even if the dust swallows me." Their fingers lingered, then broke apart. Jacob stepped out into the sunlight, rifle steady, boots on burning stone. The wind whipped his coat around him. Below, riders moved through the canyon, their shouts rising like the roar of a storm. He took a breath and raised his gun. "Come and take it!" The first wave charged. Inside the cave, Tessa watched from the shadows, tears streaking her face, her heart pounding like hooves in her chest. Then she turned, mounted her horse, and rode north, into light, into hope, into the unknown. Behind her, the sound of gunfire tore through the morning like thunder breaking sky. If this story has found a heartbeat in the dust, stay close. The storm's not done, and love still fights to live through the smoke. The shots echoed down the canyon, rolling through the desert like thunder too heavy to fade. Smoke rose in thin ribbons from the rocks near the ridge, curling up into the pale sky. Jacob Rains crouched low behind a boulder, rifle empty, revolver half spent. The smell of gunpowder clung to him like sin. His shoulder burned where a bullet had grazed flesh, but he was still breathing, and that was enough. The last man came fast, reckless, shooting wild. Jacob waited for the rhythm, 1, 2, 3, and when the pause came, he stepped out, aimed, and fired once. The sound cracked sharp and final. The man dropped, dust rising around him like a curtain closing. Silence followed, long, heavy, endless. Jacob stood still for a moment, chest heaving. He looked down the slope at the still bodies lying half in shadow. The desert didn't mourn its dead. It just swallowed them back into itself. He wiped blood from his cheek with the back of his hand and turned toward the cave. But Tessa was gone, like he'd told her to be. A part of him had expected her to disobey. Another part had hoped she would. He slid the revolver into its holster and began the slow walk down the ridge, every muscle burning, every breath sharp with grit. By the time he reached the basin, the sun was high and merciless. The world shimmered. His vision swam with heat. He followed the faint trail north, hooves, prints, the ghost of her passing. He found her hours later near the split canyon, kneeling beside her horse, trying to water it from the trickle of a spring. When she saw him coming, she froze, then stood, her face pale, her eyes wide. "Jacob," she breathed. He reined in his horse, half a smile breaking through the exhaustion. "You didn't ride far enough." She ran to him, her hands finding his arm. "You're hurt." "I've been worse." She shook her head, tears slipping free. "I thought you were dead." "Not yet," he said softly. For a moment she just stared at him, like she couldn't decide whether to strike him or hold him. Then she did both. Her fists pressed weakly against his chest before melting into his embrace. Jacob wrapped his arms around her, resting his chin against her hair. The smell of dust and smoke and her filled the air. "I told you to go," he murmured. "I did," she whispered. "But I couldn't keep going without knowing if you were still breathing." He pulled back, eyes steady on hers. "You shouldn't have risked it." "Then stop giving me reasons to," she said. That made him laugh, low and rough. "Can't promise that." They sank down beside the spring. The water gleamed silver in the sunlight. Jacob tore a strip from his sleeve and pressed it to his shoulder wound. She took over the task, her fingers gentle but sure. "Hold still," she said. "I'm trying." "You're terrible at it." He smiled faintly. "You're bossy for an outlaw's daughter." She met his gaze, a spark of something bright breaking through the weariness. "Maybe I learned from the lawman who won't stop saving me." They sat in silence for a while, letting the desert breathe around them. The wind sighed through the canyon, soft as forgiveness. Finally, Tessa spoke, her voice quiet. "You were right. About the gold. It's better off buried where no one can find it." Jacob nodded. "You remember where that grave lies?" She pointed toward the far horizon. "Beyond the Black Mesa. 3 days' ride. East of the dry river." He looked at her, eyes narrowing slightly. "If we go there, there's no turning back." "I know. Men will come," he said. "Always do." "Then we'll bury what's left of them too," she said, the steel in her voice surprising him. He studied her face, dusty, sunburned, alive. "You're not the same woman who built that fire by the bridge." She smiled faintly. "You're not the same man who found me there." The sun dipped lower. Shadows lengthened across the sand. Jacob reached out, brushing his thumb across the scar on her cheek. "He gave you that?" She nodded once. "The night he told me not to come looking for him again." Jacob's voice dropped to a whisper. "You deserved better than the blood that made you." Tessa's eyes softened. "And you deserved better than the law that broke you." He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers. The silence between them felt sacred. "Jacob," she whispered. "Why do you keep fighting for me?" He breathed her name like a confession. "Because I've spent too long fighting everything else." For a long moment, neither moved. The desert around them seemed to fade to nothing. The wind, the heat, even the ache. There was only touch, breath, heartbeat. When he finally spoke again, his voice was low and certain. When we bury your father's gold, we bury the ghosts too. After that, we stop running." She nodded. "And then?" He smiled, tired and true. "Then we find out what it means to live." Tessa rested her head against his shoulder, the world stilling around them. For the first time, the desert didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a promise. Far in the distance, a hawk circled high above the ridge, a small, dark mark against the burning sky. If this story has quieted something wild in your chest, stay close. The dawn ahead carries both forgiveness and fire. 3 days later, the desert gave way to the black mesas, sharp, ancient shapes rising out of the endless gold. The land was quiet, save for the wind moving through the canyons like a hymn too old to remember the words. Jacob Rains rode beside Tessa Wilder in silence. Dust clung to their clothes. The sun had burned them both into the same color of survival. They had buried men, ghosts, and almost themselves along the way. But somehow they were still here, together. At dusk, they reached the place her father had marked. It wasn't much to look at, just a stretch of dry earth where the desert folded in on itself, a few old stones half sunk in sand. But Jacob felt it before she spoke, the weight in the air, the kind of silence that remembers. "This is it," Tessa said. He dismounted slowly, boots crunching on gravel. "You sure?" "I remember that ridge. He made me stand there while he buried it." Her voice was distant, almost reverent. "He said the desert doesn't keep secrets, only debts." Jacob looked out over the emptiness. "Then let's pay it back." They dug with their hands, with pieces of old wood, with whatever the land gave them. Sweat mixed with dust. The sun bled itself into the horizon, and then, finally, the shovel struck wood. Tessa froze. Her breath caught. Together they uncovered a small chest, weathered and half-rotted, the iron hinges rusted but still holding. She knelt before it, her hands trembling as she lifted the lid. Inside lay coins, gold dulled by years and blood. Jacob saw the glint of something else among them, a small silver locket, still tarnished, still whole. Tessa lifted it, opened it with care. Inside, a tiny drawing of a girl, herself, maybe 6 years old, her throat closed. "My father carried this," she whispered. "All that killing, all that running, and he still carried this." Jacob watched her face in the fading light. "Maybe even the damned remember what they loved." Tears slipped down her cheek, cutting clean lines through the dust. "What do we do with it?" Jacob took a deep breath, his voice steady. "We end it here. All of it." They gathered stones, built a small cairn over the chest. Then Jacob struck a match and dropped it onto the pile. Flames licked upward, pale and hungry, devouring the dry air. The fire caught fast, gold against the twilight. Tessa stood beside him, her face glowing in the light. "Feels like watching the past burn," she said. "It is," he answered. "And maybe for once, it's a mercy." They stood there until the fire died down to embers. When the last flame went out, the desert seemed to breathe again. The wind moved through the sage, carrying away the smoke, the guilt, the weight. Jacob turned to her. "It's done." She looked up at him, eyes rimmed red, voice soft. "Then what now?" He smiled faintly. Now we start over. She stepped closer, her hand finding his chest, resting over his heart. Do you think men like you ever get to start over? He took her hand in his voice low and sure. Maybe not men like me, but maybe we can start anyway. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. The wind stilled. The silence stretched wide enough to hold them both. Then she rose on her toes and kissed him, slow, certain, without fear this time. The firelight behind them glowed soft and warm. His hands framed her face, rough against her skin, but his touch was steady, reverent. It wasn't the desperate hunger of a storm. It was something quieter, the kind of love that grows after the wreckage. When they finally broke apart, the stars had begun to pierce the dark. Tessa leaned her head against his chest. You think the desert ever forgives? Jacob looked toward the horizon, where night met the earth in a long silver line. No, he said, but sometimes it forgets. And that's enough. She smiled, eyes half closed. You always know what to say. He laughed softly. Only after I've said too little for too long. They built a small fire by the cairn, the night cool around them. The horses grazed nearby, the world hushed except for the crackle of flame and the slow rhythm of two people breathing the same air. Jacob took off his hat, set it beside him, and looked at her through the glow. You ready to stop running, Tessa Wilder? She reached for his hand. Only if you stop with me. He nodded once, slow and certain. Then we stop here. The stars watched in silence. Somewhere far away, a coyote called, and the desert answered back with quiet peace. In that stillness, they found what all storms hide, not just survival, but a kind of grace. And as the fire burned low, Jacob's voice came soft, meant for her and whoever might still be listening beyond the horizon. If this story has touched a tender place in your heart, he said, let your light stay with us, so the fire never dies, and the desert keeps remembering what love can be.